Hello and welcome to our talk today about rapid development environments, in short RDE. And that's Natalia Angulo and me, Karl Pauls. And we're going to start out with Natalia giving you a little bit of an overview of the motivation we had for creating rapid development environments and what they're there for. And then I will give the first quick demo of how they're supposed to be used. After that, we're going to zoom into how they're built and what their strengths are and what you can use them for and how. And then there will be a longer demo showing you an end-to-end example of how to use it for daily developer workflows. And then we're going to wrap it up looking into some of the details and how you can get them actually from Cloud Manager and use them. So without further ado, Natalia, over to you.
Thank you, Carl. So, well, during this talk, we are going to talk about Adobe Experience Manager in the cloud, as known as AEM, as a cloud service. So basically, we're going to present to you what kind of environments we have, what we did in order to improve the developer experience in the cloud for the developers. So basically, we can start talking about the local SDK and how developers use it. So most of you might be already in contact with the local SDK, and perhaps you have also used it. Actually, AEM is famous for providing such a tool for local development. So basically, you just need to go to a public URL and download the AEM local SDK, put it in your laptop, run it, and then you can just iterate very quickly, building your Maven project locally, push the changes to the local instance of the AEM SDK that you are running. Also, you can install bundles, updated scripts, whatever you want to do within AEM. And then you will get feedback within seconds. So the idea is that developers can quickly iterate and make quick changes in the local SDK. And then once it is ready, be ready for the cloud. But then we realize, okay, this might have some gaps. I mean, because actually, if we think about the local SDK and the cloud, we can see a missing parity between these. Because actually, in cloud, you can also have other features that you don't have in your local laptop. Although this is a good approximation, we are missing features like add-ons, for instance. You cannot test add-ons in your local laptop, or CDN configuration. This is something that you can configure in the cloud, or even further on, assets essentials, for instance. This is a good example because assets processing actually, this in the cloud uses like a external service that we have. And then in the local SDK, we try to simulate that internal service that we are using in the cloud, but it is not really the same. I mean, we are trying to simulate the same, but there are some differences. So just thinking about this is a good reason, but even more, also in the cloud, we try to be on the latest version of AEM. So what happens if you update your cloud instance to a newer version of AEM? Then now all the developers for the company need to go to the laptop, go again to the public repository, download again the latest local SDK or the SDK that is matching the same version in the cloud, and then run it again and so on. So this is actually a time-consuming task, and also it's a little bit painful for all the developers to need to do this. So these are the two main reasons that make us think, hey, how we can improve this. But actually, to talk a little bit more about how is the process nowadays or how it was before our change, developers could just push their changes to dev environments. Dev environment in reality is not a developer environment as it is. We can just talk about it more like a testing environment, because actually the idea is that a developer can just use the local SDK in their laptop. They just iterate over the changes. They are sure that, okay, I think this is working now. And then I can just run a pipeline to deploy to dev environment. This pipeline takes up to 30 minutes. So that's actually a big reason why this environment is not really a development environment. It's more like a testing environment, because you cannot quickly iterate over it. You cannot just say, okay, I'm gonna just push a change, see if it works, and then make another change. I mean, you can, but then you are gonna spend the entire day just doing that. So in this pipeline that is taking up to 30 minutes, we are building the project, which is taken from the Git repository that you are pushing your changes. Then we are also validating the changes, running some analyzers here, and we are deploying the code. While we are deploying the code, actually, there is also a big difference, is that in the local SDK, we update the code at runtime. But here in the dev environment, we just deploy the code in a new instance. And we keep the old instances running the old code. We spin up new instances running the new code. We turn down the old instances, and then the new ones are alive. So actually, dev is behaving more like stage and production, right? Because this is what we want to do in stage and production, to have high availability. So given this, then we just realized that actually there are some disparity, and we want to provide a new tool or a new thing to improve the developer experience. So we thought, okay, then we can create a new environment type, probably, which doesn't have a pipeline associated, because this is taking a long time. Also, there will not be Git. I mean, we are trying to simulate what the local SDK is doing, pushing changes at runtime. Actually, you can deploy anything you want. That was the idea, the configuration, bundles, scripts, or even the web tier configuration, because actually in dev stage and prod, you also have a dedicated pipeline to deploy the web tier changes. So if we don't have pipeline, then we also need to provide this capability to the environment. And the main goal was always to validate a new feature and code quickly. I mean, runtime also means validate the new feature and iterate over it quickly, right? So we can just push, as we were doing in the local SDK, and get feedback. We thought about doing this, again, since we don't have pipelines and other tools, we thought about having a public API. So there is actually a public API for this kind of thing that I'm going to show you. And the communication is going to be done via the AIO plugin, the AIO CLI that most of you might already know, because there are some tools also to communicate via Cloud Manager. There is a plugin for Cloud Manager. So we just developed a new plugin for RDE, which is the name that we gave to our new environment type. So rapid development environments, as known as RDE. So the idea is, again, the local SDK, but on the cloud. That's as simple as it sounds. So we just give some tools to the developers. You can push your changes that you have previously built in your local machine. Then you push them to the environment. They are deployed, and you get feedback. And this entire process happens between seconds or a few minutes. I'm just talking about few minutes in the worst case where you are deploying a big content package, right? If you are just modifying and doing small iterations, it's gonna be seconds. So now, in order to know a little bit more about rapid development environments, Carl is gonna show you a very brief demo.
Right. Let's have a look at on a high level how that works and what it actually looks like if we just want to make a small change to some example, right? And then we're going to look here at an RDE environment that already exists, and specifically on the author. And we have a very simple demo application deployed here. It's just basically showing an image of trees, right? And let's assume we're looking at that and we don't like that the background we see. It's white, right? So now if we think about how we can can change it, or we want to give it a different color. So that's, in this case, actually something that's configurable. That's a config that exists. So I would go to my local code, find the config, and change the background to be blue, right? So it's a simple property, but now I would need to commit it, and it would go to Git and be built and deployed, which takes a long time. So, and with RDEs, luckily we don't have to do this. We can use the AIO plugin that Natalia already mentioned, and it has an install command, and all I need to give it is the path to the local config file that I just changed, in this case, the hotdev CFG, and it's going to upload it, and then the update is applied. We still do some validation in this step, and it takes a moment until it reaches the instances. So it's not instantaneously, but it's within a couple of seconds. So as soon as the update is done, we can go back to our running instance in the cloud, refresh, and we hope that we will see that the background now has changed, and boom, there you go, it's blue. But yeah, just to re-emphasize, this is meant to be developer reiteration case. Let's say we don't like blue, and we want to go back and change it to be different color, in this case honeydew. Well, again, works just like before. I just change the config, I run the install again on the same config file I just changed. In this case, it's going to be a little bit quicker, and then just applies the update, and we can switch back to our instance, and it's going to look hopefully different. Namely, it has a much nicer background. So there we go. So this is on a high level what RDE provides you, right? It gives you instances in the cloud, like you used to, but you can directly upload your changes to them, and this way have a much hopefully much more pleasing, but certainly quicker turnaround time during development.
Okay, yeah, that was pretty quick. As we are mentioning, that is the goal of Rapid, as the name says, development environments. So now let's dive a little bit into the architecture, or how all the flow is between your terminal as a client and the environment. And also let's highlight the differences between dev environments and Rapid Dev. So first of all, let's go through the flow. So then we will see the differences afterwards. So actually you just have, again, the AIO command. You just have the AIO tool and the plugins installed in your laptop. And the first thing, once you run the install command and you specify a file, then this file is uploaded to the cloud. So in this step, it depends on your internet connection, that is goes faster or not. So once this is done, then there is a second step to communicate with our internal services via the public API. So here in this internal service, the first thing we do is actually to run some analyzers if it proceeds. Because actually what we want to do is to catch problems the earlier the better. So we are running the same analyzers as we are running in the pipeline that you have also for dev stage or prod in the build image step. So here, if there are some problems, then we will report it back. And depending on the problem, it might continue and just report the feedback, or the changes can be staged and not deployed. For instance, imagine that you want to deploy a bundle that is missing some dependencies. So in order to avoid to have AEM as crash, right? Because the bundle will not be able to start. So what we do is to report a message to you saying, okay, you are missing these dependencies. And then you will see a message saying the deployment was staged. So basically at this point, you can iterate and do them as many deployments as you want in order to upload the missing dependencies to the cloud. So once we detect, okay, everything looks good, no missing dependencies, we think everything is correct, at least given the analyzer report, then we just continue and push the change to the cloud, to the AM instances. So in the AM instances, you can see we only have one author and we only have one publish. This is because we are just trying to simulate what you already have in the local SDK, keeping it simple. And we are consuming from the segment store. This is quite similar to the local store, to the local SDK and how it worked with the install folder. But now we have the segment store. So actually, this is one difference with development environments. Because in dev, you have MongoDB, but now you have the segment store and you don't have Mongo. So if you want to test something about performance in Mongo, don't use RDEs because we are not using Mongo. But for quickly iterate and change and test your changes, this is perfectly ideal because it will give you feedback in a brief period of time. But not only that difference, actually, you can also see that I mentioned we only have one author and we only have one publish. This is because we don't have high availability. And actually, you can even see sometimes service outages. Again, this is trying to simulate your local laptop, your local SDK running in the laptop, and keeping things as simple as possible. So if you deploy some code, that change the internal configuration of AM and AM needs to be restarted for any reason, you will see an outage. If Kubernetes just decides to reschedule the pod from one cluster instance to another, you will see an outage. And actually, you will see also this report while playing with the AIO commands. So these kind of things are the differences between RD and dev. And given that, actually, we recommend you not to run load testing in rapid development environments because they are not ready for that. So if you want to run load testing, it will be better just to go to dev state environments, but not here. Additionally, there are small differences, right? Besides what I already told you. One of them is actually that, for instance, we are not pre-compiling scripts, but again, small difference. I talk a little about the differences, but also I want to talk about the similarities because actually, the mutable content job, how it is treated, it is the same as in dev stage and prod because we try to simulate the same. So how it works is, firstly, it goes to the author, it is installed there, and then the replication process will just pick up the content from the author and put it in the publish. So that's the same. Okay, so this is more or less an overview of the rapid development environments and the differences between dev and rapid dev. So now Carl is going to give you a bigger demo about how to work this in deep.
Exactly. And I think it's worthwhile to mention, so part of the reason we're using segment store 2 is that in RDEs, at least via the command line tool, apps is writable as well, right? So we really envision that you can update scripts as during the development process as well. And yeah, that's the question here now. So what does it look like? I have let's assume, and we get to that later, how you get it. But let's assume I have this running RDE environment someplace, right? And I have my local code checkout from my normal repository, and I want to get to start developing, right? So how does that work? So in the beginning, I need to install the AIO command, and for that you need Node. It's pretty much the only dependency you have. So you need Node installed, and then you can go. It's on the public website. It's pretty easy to find. But all you have to do is to say npm install the AIO CLI command, right? And that's going to take a moment here. Has to download all the dependencies, and there's a couple of warnings that you can ignore. But once it's done, we have the AIO command installed, which is the outer shell that we're going to use for the rest of it. But we actually need 2 plugins for this to work end to end. There's one plugin you might already know, which is from Cloud Manager, the AIO Cloud Manager plugin, which allows you to get various information and run certain commands regarding environments and programs. And on top of that, we have one for RDE that is then specific for interacting with RDE. So as we can see here now, the AIO command is installed. It comes with some commands already out of the box. Most of them we don't need for RDE. But again, we need the Cloud Manager plugin. So that's one-time install using the AIO plugins command. The Cloud Manager, this one is really quick. And then we need the RDE command. And once we have those two installed, the next task will be to configure AIO, and by this, the plugins, with some coordinates for your actual environment. And you can do that with using the AIO config command. There's a way to do it in a local mode. So then it's only valid in the current folder that you're in case you have several environments, let's say, and you want to provision them from different folders. You can use it with local. Otherwise, just don't use that local flag. And then it's global, but you need to give it your org ID, your program ID, and the environment ID for the RDE environment. But with that, you have a local file then, because you made it local, called .aio, which contains this information. Otherwise, it would be globally set. But that's all we need. And since we installed the two plugins already, we can now go ahead and log in. There's a way to do it with an integration as well. So if you don't want to do the normal user-based login, you can configure an integration. Here, we're just going to go and log in as a normal iOS user. The important thing here is if you should you happen to have several orgs associated with your user, you need to pick the right one in the next dialog here, right? Because if you use the wrong one, you don't get the right permissions, right? So you need to use the same one that you configured here as the org ID. So, but now we're logged in, and we can contact the RDE for the first time. And we do that using the status command. It will show us what's deployed currently, and there's nothing. So we don't have bundles or configurations. So let's go ahead and install our all package. And in this case, we're going to cheat a little bit, and we're going to install the all package from the internet. You can give it the install command, either a URL or a local file. And in this case, we're going to give it a URL to a content package that already exists, namely the weekend all package. And we're just going to take it from repo 1 directly. If you use a URL, it's going to try to do a server-side copy, so that's typically pretty quick. Otherwise, obviously, it depends a little bit on your local connection, how long it takes to upload the file from your computer to the cloud. In this case, it's a server-side copy, so we will see that it happens. Should speed up here in a second, and then, yeah, as you can see, the upload is then obviously pretty quick. And from there on, it's going to process that update, do all the extraction, then run the analyzers as they would in the build image step. And what you end up with then is it deploying it to the instances live as soon as it's done processing, which, again, in the weekend case here, takes maybe a minute, a little bit over a minute to do. As you can see, it's reasonably quick. So now we can go to our actual environment and see it already, but in the weekend case, we also have to install the dispatcher. In this case now, let's see how it looks when we install the dispatcher from the local disk. Again, same command, install command, we just pointed to the dispatcher zip file. That's the zipped up dispatcher directory. In this case, we don't need to give a -t. That's mostly only needed if you do a URL install, because then we don't know the type. But if it's local, we just look into the artifacts to infer it. So yeah, we can infer it here. We just say, okay, please install the dispatcher as well. And you will see here in a second that it also did run the dispatcher checks while applying the update. So we should get some feedback about whether those were okay or not. But that's pretty much all. Yeah, and you see it here. So syntax okay. So the dispatcher was okay. Now we have weekend deployed. Right? That's all we needed to get started. So if we go now to our publish, we should see that we have it deployed, and you can use the status again to verify what we deployed. In this case, a couple of bundles and a couple of configurations. Content packages are not listed here. This is only what you can delete afterwards. So you can see we have the weekend deployed. It's there. But again, for a normal workflow, we now would assume after you provisioned your all package that you would start to do more fine-grained changes. You can rebuild everything and re-upload your all package, but it's not necessary. You can do it on a per bundle or config or even in a repository file basis. And that's what we're going to show here. Again, that would also work for scripts and apps. But here we're going to do it based on content, and just going to navigate to a content fragment here on the author inside the weekend adventure, and then turn around, go to our local disk and find where that one is coming from. It's going to be in the UI content package of the local checkout. And we're going to open that up in an editor and can just start editing it. You can see it up there a little bit. It's inside weekend, UI content, etc. So we're just going to add the I want to change my footer string to the footer experience fragment. And then similar to what we did before, and again, it would work like that for bundles and configs and whatnot as well. You just give the path to the local file that you changed, in this case, the content XML, and you have to give it a -p in this case to tell it what's the path, the remote path in the repository that you want to overwrite. And when we do that, it's uploading it, it's applying the update, and again, takes a moment, but it's not too bad. And then you can go back to our author and see what it looks like with the changed file. So let's go there. Go to edit. You have to wait a moment until it's rebuilding the page here in this case, because we did change and validated all the caches. So it takes a moment, but yes, if we now scroll down to the footer, you will see that it has the I want to change my footer down there. It's not super visible, but it's there, trust me. So right. So and then for real development, what you also want to do is to be able to do some inspection, obviously, and for that you have the developer console. You can go to it via the plugin as well, but you can find it normally as well. You need to log in again, but then you have the tools to look up bundles and various statuses, but also you have the repository browser, which is not a full CRXDE replacement, as it doesn't allow you to edit anything, even in an RDE case, at least not yet. But again, at least you can use it for browsing the repository state, right? So you can, if you want to browse repository state, you can do it in the repository browser and see what it looks like, and you can make the changes locally and then upload them with the AIO command. And here in this case, yeah, if you go drill down deep enough, you see I want to change my footer. Yes, that's the path we specified, and it actually updated accordingly. Yep, and that's it for the demo here. Let's go, but we have a recap now from Natalia about what the commands actually all are and do.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Well, definitely that was a quick demo to install a big content package, as it is the weekend side one. Okay, so let's do a recap about the AIO commands. So actually, you saw them, most of them in the demo that Carl already presented you, but let's go very quickly through them again. So basically, we have the install command, which actually I just want to highlight some flags here. So again, remember, you can just send a local path to a local file or a URL from the cloud. So then you will just use that reference for the content that you want to deploy. So for the -- type, this is just here to tell you what types would actually currently support. So we support to deploy OSGI bundles, OSGI config, or content packages, content file, content XML, or dispatcher configuration, where the dispatcher configuration, you need to build a zip locally and push it. So those are the types that we support. And also, additionally, I want to mention the -- force flag, because actually how rapid development environments are think to be used is we only allow one deployment at a time. So how this works is actually we try to reserve some time. Remember what I already mentioned to you. We just first step is to push the file or the thing that you want to deploy to the cloud, and then you communicate with internal services at Adobe. So right away you start a command called install. Then we just make you a reservation for around 5 minutes for you to deploy. So that means that if any other workmate tries to access and install something into the same RDE, they will get a concurrent modification error or status for the environment. If for any reason you just cancel the process, or or any other workmate is hurry and wants to deploy their changes, then you just can use the --4 flag, and then you will go ahead and override it. So what else? We also have the delete command. And here we only allow you to delete OSCI bundles or configurations. And the status is actually a command where you can also see the environment status, if it is ready, or if there is a deployment in progress, which can happen if Kubernetes decides to reschedule the pod, or AM is restarting because your changes affects the kernel of AM and needs to be restarted, or because you updated something in the cloud, like environment variable, and it caused a restart or something like that. And the concurrent modification, which is what I mentioned to you with the --4 flag. Besides the status of the environment, you will also see a list of bundles and configurations that you have already installed. The history command is another which is pretty interesting, because actually you can see what happened into the environment since it was created or resetted. We will see the term of resetted afterwards. So here you will see, okay, this user ID, you will not see names because we are respecting privacy, but you will see this user ID is actually deployed a bundle or a configuration or a content package into the environment at this time, and it failed or succeed. With the reset, actually, you are gonna wipe out all the content and things that you install into your environment, but you will keep the things that you have configured in the cloud, like environment variables, CDN, or other stuff via Cloud Manager. We will dive a little bit more into this command afterwards. And the restart. This is just a tool that we provide to you. So you are auto-sufficient, and then you can troubleshooting into your environment. And perhaps you see, okay, AM is stuck. I would just want to restart the process just to see if it fixed my issue, and then you can restart the environment by yourself. So this is just a brief overview of the commands, and let's talk a little bit more about the details of the rapid development environments. So this is just a new environment type, as we mentioned. So if we go to Cloud Manager and we click on New Environment, you will see the option about creating a new rapid dev environment, as you do for the stage and prod. The reset operation. I already mentioned that this is wiping out the content, the installed content, and the things that you installed. Plus, right now, we are upgrading always to the latest AM version. But it is true that we are still discussing internally if we might be able to provide in the future the option to choose between perhaps the prod version that you have in your AM instances, so you can try to debug something from there. But so far, you will be always in the latest AM version. It is important here to mention that this is wiping out all the content, but you can also make use of other cloud features like the content backflow. So you can just, create a content backflow set and copy and transfer some content into your rapid development environments using that tool. So that might be something useful for you in case you reset and you want to recover some content. And this is something that I want to mention, but there is no difference between other environments. If you have a program sandbox and you have a rapid dev environment there, then it will be hibernated after some time of inactivity. But if you are in a production program and you have a rapid dev, for sure, it will not be hibernated. Additionally, this is production enabled for everyone. So you should just go to the cloud and see these rapid development environments enabled for you. And as a baseline, you are getting some for free. Actually, if you just have a sandbox program, you will get one for free. And also you will get one per solution applied into a production program. If you want to get more, to buy more, you just need to reach out to your account executive and get more. There are no limits. So now Carl is going to present a wrap-up demo.
Yes, we're almost at the end here, so I wanted to quickly show what it looks like from the Cloud Manager side and what Natalia already mentioned here. So the important thing is how can I, how do I get my RDE and how do I reset it, right? So let's have a quick look at that. So you probably all know the Cloud Manager UI, just in case you weren't sure where you find your current org ID. If you can do it here, that's if you are in doubt what the current org ID is. But here we have a sandbox environment. And as Natalia mentioned, that means you get one rapid development environment for free. So we can just go here and create it just like any other environment in the sandbox. So that's one way to get it if you have a sandbox. If you're in a normal program, you should have some already, and they have in the ... this reset. And the reset really is equivalent to saying if I have my AIO here configured correctly and I'm logged in with the right user, I can also use the reset command, right? So whether you go to the ... in the UI and say reset, or you do it via AIO, doesn't matter. The benefit of the AIO command is it is blocking, so you can you know when it's done, and it takes some time to reset, right? So if you want to reset, and that's really the end of what we typically envision a developer use case would be, right? You made your changes, you're sure it's working, you commit it to your dev environment, and then you reset your RDE and you start again from scratch. So that, and if you see here, we called reset, it's going to work in the background, and while it's resetting, the environment is going to be marked as resetting as well. So we see it here now, right? Our RDE environment is resetting at the moment. And again, I mean, if you can just go and create those RDEs in your normal program, as much credits as you have for them. By default, one per solution. So you might have more than one RDE that you can create. How many you can see if you go to add environment, you see here, in our case, it's a little bit much. You would have 22 and we already used 11. But you can, as Natalia mentioned, theoretically, you can buy more credits for RDEs if you need more than the ones that you have. You just have to talk to people to get you more RDE credits if you need them to. And again, I mean, the reset is really meant to be the end of the developer flow, right? It's gonna wipe the instances both in terms of content as well as code, including the immutable part. So if you change scripts or things like that, all of that should be reset to vanilla. So if you go again and want to have another thing that you want to develop, you can after a reset. And with that, I think we are at the end of our talk. And let's see if there are some questions. Not sure how that's going to work.
All right. Thank you, Carl and Natalia. That was great. Do we have a closing slide here with the contextual thread, or are we done?
No, we're done.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So I do have a couple of questions for you from the chat. I know Julian and David have been really active there and answered most of them already. The first one is, can we already use the RDE on AEM as a cloud service, or something is not available yet?
It is fully available right now. As we already mentioned, I mean, this is production enabled for everyone. So you should just go to AEM as a cloud service, to Cloud Manager, and see the possibility of creating a new rapid development environment, as Carl mentioned in the latest demo.
Okay, great.
And as I said, I mean, it's really, if you have some available, then you can use them, right? So every sandbox should have the capability of creating one RDE. So I mean, that's already there.
Awesome. And the next question is, does it matter if we use the client's Git repo versus Adobe's Git repo to deploy to RDEs, or can we check out any repo and just execute the commands to deploy?
I think it really doesn't matter. I mean, what you deploy to RDEs, as I was trying to say, is you, I guess, at least initially, you typically would deploy an all package, right? So wherever you get that from, and as you could see in the demo, right, it's even you just take the weekend all package, you can just deploy it. So if you build of course you have to build the repo in question, right? So in this case, you would check out the client's Git repo, build it, or have it auto built in an action, and then just deploy the result.
Okay. I see another one here. For multiple development teams using RDE, what's the recommended approach?
Well, there are two approaches here, depending on what the customer can afford. You can either synchronize between the team, within the team, and coordinate who is going to use an RD environment and when, or ideally, if you can afford it, then you can just have one RD environment per developer. But again, I mean, it is enough just to communicate within the team. And we did it on this way actually to avoid having conflicts, because I mean, if you are setting an RDE and you are modifying the same thing at the same time, you might end up just being crazy on what happened. So you just need to coordinate and
right. We protect you at least from making concurrent changes without knowing about it, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, it's possible to timeshare it, but yeah, if obviously for the best experience that is the closest match to what you used to with SDK, you get your own environment, or maybe at least really share it in terms of bigger time frame and reset in between. But yeah, I mean, at least the reset gives you that guarantee, right? What you can do is to say, well, I take the RDE environment for now, I do some development, I'm done, I'm resetting it, and then somebody else is free to take it, right? Because everything I did is gone. So.
Great. And I do have one last question. It looks like we have just enough time to answer it. What specific permissions do you need to push to RDE?
So basically, you need the developer cloud role, as you also need it for the developer console, because actually the public API is behind the dev console. So you need the same role to log into the dev console. You can just find it out in the public docs. And access to the organization, I mean, you need to be able to list the programs and these kind of roles from Cloud Manager. And that's all.
All
yeah,
right.
exactly. The cloud developer role should be the one that you need.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Carl and Natalia. If there's anything else you have, great. Otherwise, we are done for this session.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.